Let's bring in retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities, and former Green Beret Derrick Anderson, who has trained with the Israeli Defense Forces. It's great to have you both on here. A senior U.S. defense official, right? We're talking about Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, had this to say, Dan, and Colonel, I want to play this for you and then get your take. Watch.
What we're seeing is the prospect of a significant escalation of attacks on our troops and our people throughout the region. And because of that, we're going to do what's necessary to make sure that our troops are in the right, good position, they're protected, and that we have the ability to respond.
You got people going after U.S. troops in the Middle East, Colonel, and it changes the entire picture in this region.
Trace, I've been arguing about this and pleading with anyone who will listen on Fox News for years that our troops there have never been there for American national security interest. And I've said specifically, these guys are just sitting out there and they will be a target for any of these regional actors if anything turns sideways elsewhere. Now it's definitely turned sideways, and now all of a sudden you've got the prospect that either an Iranian-backed group or, God forbid, even an Iranian group could, if things go even worse, could actually attack and kill Americans. Now, so far, no Americans have been killed, but I've already seen many people on the Hill here say that if any of them are, that they're going to be calling for strikes directly against Iran. That would be a disaster because that could suck us into a war we don't need to fight.
Derrick, let's talk about the ground invasion, the impending ground invasion. We talk about this every day. It's almost daybreak here. We wonder if day 18 will be the day. Is it a great idea? Is there a reason that IDF is holding back aside from the political pressure? Do they need more time to get ready, to get aligned, to figure out what they're facing?
Yeah, Trace, I think there's a few factors to take in consideration, and not necessarily all the any of the Israelis' faults. For instance, over the last couple of days, we've seen a lot of political leaders showing up into Israel to meet with Netanyahu. I mean, at the end of the day, when I was in the Green Berets, we had VIPs come in all the time, and that ceases your operations. It stops operations. Security has to be in place. We've also been seeing the Israelis and the IDF really using aerial and artillery fires to soften the target that is Gaza so that they can allow a pathway for their ground forces to go in and their special operations to go in and do precision type raids. But the big thing, I think, is this hostage situation, right? We've seen over the last few days, within the last week, these 4 hostages that have been released. I do think that there's some gamesmanship potentially going on right there with Hamas, where they're trying to potentially give 1 or 2 hostages here and there to try to delay the ground force for the Israelis. But at the end of the day, when the Israelis do go in there, it's going to be deliberate and it's going to be methodical, and they're going to bring it to Hamas.
Yeah, and I wonder, Colonel, because, the people I just interviewed, when they say 1 or 2 are coming out at a time, their whole conclusion is, yeah, but it's 1 or 2. We want them out. We don't care how slowly they come out. We want them out. Is there, in your estimation, Colonel, is there a reason to go in now with this ground invasion?
No, absolutely not. In fact, I'm emphatically saying that the Israeli Defense Force would be wise to hold off, 2 or 3 months. I would recommend that they isolate the whole Gaza Strip, especially that section where they're focusing their forces, because that does 2 things. Number one, it makes Hamas weaker by the day because they don't have any supplies. They have a hard time even getting food and water, much less fuel. And it gives the Israeli side a chance to continue to prepare, to train, to do intelligence preparation of the battlefield so they have a really good plan, and then to rehearse it before they go in. The U.S. spent 3 months before we went into Fallujah in 2004, and we needed every bit of those days. And I think the same thing is true here, and it also gives time for some of those hostages, especially if Qatar can bring out 70 of them.
Yeah, and I guess the last question to you would be, Derrick, if this ground war started today, does it mean big jeopardy for Hezbollah as well as Hamas, or does Hezbollah get in this from the north?
I think Hezbollah right now is watching every single thing that the Israelis are doing. There's no doubt in my mind that as soon as Israel breaks the berm, as we used to call it, into Gaza, that Hezbollah will ramp up their operations and their attacks on the north. I do think one consideration also to take into fact is that for every day that the Israelis are delaying, but for good reason for most of the part, is that is giving Hamas the opportunity to put things like IEDs in place, to put obstacles in place for that ground force. But to your point, Trace, yes, as soon as Israel starts moving into Gaza, there's no doubt that Hezbollah will likely ramp up their operations in the north.
Yeah, and a lot of people have shared that opinion. Colonel, Derrick, thank you both. Well, meantime, the Pentagon is deploying more aerial defense systems to the Middle East after Iranian-backed terror groups launched drone and missile attacks on U.S. troops in the region. Lauren Green is live with more on that troubling twist in the war. Lauren, good evening.
Good evening, Trace. Well, drones again targeting U.S. forces in the Middle East, this time in Syria, where defense officials say 2 attack drones were taken down with no injuries reported. This follows other recent drone and rocket incidents in the region.